Let's do problem number 33. Out of 219 random tweets in December, 100 were about presents received. Out of 235 random Instagram posts in December, 116 were posts about food. At the 1% significance level, do the data provide sufficient evidence to conclude that the proportion of tweets about presents is less than the proportion of Instagram posts about food? So we're comparing two proportions. So this is a hypothesis test for two proportions. So we have two sets of data. Let's start with the tweets. So we have 219 random tweets. That'll be n sub 1. That's our first sample size. And 100 of them were about presents received. So that'll be success. So x1, 100. Then here we have 235 random Instagram posts. That'll be n sub 2. And here we have 116 being about food. That would be x sub 2. And then our 1% significance level, that's our alpha. And then now we can go ahead and do the steps. So step 1. So for step 1, we have to identify the null and alternative hypotheses. So the null is HO, and the alternative is H1. And since our question is about two proportions, it's always P1 equals P2 for the null hypothesis. Always, no matter what. Just it's totally worth memorizing. So it's always that. And so now we can read the last sentence to get H1. So it says the proportion of tweets about presents, that's P1, is less than the proportion of Instagram posts about food. So less than P2. So the last sentence will usually give you H1, pretty much almost always, or always. So 2 and 3 are StatCrunch steps, right? The test statistic and the p-value. Thankfully, we have software to do this. Otherwise, it's a lot more work to do it by hand. All right. So we go to, let me delete this. This is from before. So we go to stat, proportion stats, and then we have two samples here. So I'm going to pick two samples, and then with summary, okay, with summary. Then you just enter everything here. So successes, that's 100. Observations is 219. Successes is 116. Observations is 235. Notice it says equal to 0. If you have P1 equals P2 and you subtract P2 from both sides, you'll just get this. You just leave it at 0 and then just change this to less than. Let me just double check. Successes, observations, less than. Good to go. And let's see, there's our test statistic. That's our Z. So Z is equal to negative point, I'll use 2 decimals. I think it's what the directions said too. And then p-value, the p-value here would be 0.2151. All right, good stuff. This is decision about the null hypothesis. So whenever you're making a decision about the null hypothesis, you just have to look at two things. You look at the p-value and you look at alpha. And if the p-value is less than or equal to alpha, you reject. If it's bigger, you fail to reject. So in this case, the p-value is bigger than alpha, so we fail to reject H0. Okay, because it's bigger. If the p-value is smaller than or equal to alpha, then you reject H0. Step 5 wants us to make a conclusion about the claim. So we start by making a statement about the significance level. I like to say at the 1% level of significance, what a big word, it's a long word. And then we have to decide if there is or there is not sufficient evidence. So whenever we reject there is, fail to reject there is not. So there is not, because we failed to reject. It's really important. So reject there is, fail to reject there is not. Then you just say sufficient evidence to claim that. So sufficient evidence to claim that. And then just go straight to the last sentence. It makes it easier. The proportion of tweets about presents, give myself some more room, that the proportion of tweets about presents is less than the proportion of Instagram posts about food. So is less than the proportion of Instagram. I guess I'm supposed to capitalize Instagram. Too late. I'll fix it. There we go. Posts about food. All right. It takes a long time to do these. Kind of went through that kind of quickly, but it's not too bad. The ones for two proportions are pretty easy because you just know that in StatCrunch, you just pick proportions and you pick two sample. The harder one is the one with two means because you have to decide if it's Z or T, but not too bad. Hopefully this video has been helpful in some way. Good luck.